everyone, and welcome to So Very Wrong About Games, a board gaming podcast about board games. With me, as always, is Michael Walker. How you doing, Walker?
Great, Marc. Very good.
I am indeed your other co-host, Marc Bigney, winner of the 3-time annual Champion of Sir, Could You Please Keep It Down award. I'm very proud of that. I'm the defending champion. So we're going to be talking about board games this week. We're going to talk about the as-yet-unnamed retrospective intro segment, the AYURIS, what we reviewed last year. We're going to talk about the games we played last week. We're going to talk about the news and why it doesn't matter. And then finally onto our topic, which is going to be set up and tear down. As Walker puts it, what goes up must come down. The things we like, the things we don't like. I confess, as I was typing out my notes, I have more grievances than I thought.
I also had to say, oh, wait, there's supposed to be two sides to this coin.
There are good things, though. I've got some good things, but it is so easy to do badly. I will also have, in traditional Marc fashion, some old man yells cloud moments. And I'll talk about how things used to be back in the halcyon days of the 20th century.
Back in the old days.
I remember the first time I said around the turn of the century. It was probably around 20 years ago, and I felt weird doing it. And now it's just, a thing.
Because it used to be like stick, rock, right?
Yeah.
And you can put it on a stick, you put it on a rock, and you're ready to go.
Sometimes another stick, sometimes a different shaped rock.
Depends on how many players,
Depends on how many players. So, the game we reviewed last year was Voidfall. It was our game of the year of 2023. And I have had occasion to play it a number of times since, which is a bit of a lift, given that it is a very long, well, not very long, it is a quite long 3 to 4 hour game that involves about an hour of setup and about an hour of rules explanation, more or less. And you can't do one without the other. So the fact that I've had occasion to play it, the two Louis are big fans of the game, even though they're not usually into heavier Euros. And so when playing with Louis, sometimes when we're able to block off 2 evenings in a row, we leave it set up, we play the first half of the game, and then we play the second half. I am a massive fan of Voidfall. I think it's aged pretty well. Seldom is it the case. We talked about this in the context of Galactic Cruise as well. A lot of the Euros in this sort of space and weight are not really calibrated to our preferences. But I remain very enthusiastic about Voidfall, and I'm even cautiously optimistic about Revenant, which is sort of the pseudo follow-up in the same universe.
So I was thinking, there's two sort of Euro-y space games, right? We have Eclipse and we have Voidfall. Do you feel, I'm thinking that they feel almost like totally different gameplay, of course.
Yes.
But do they sort of fill the same sort of bracket when you go to, I want to play a Euro-y space game? Is it like...
It depends on how you want to slice it, because you're right that there are aspects of Eclipse that feel very evocative of Voidfall when you are managing your economy, when you're planning out your action efficiency, when you're figuring, okay, can I get A and B done before I get C done so as to trigger this additional bonus? But everything about the combat and how much it influences the rest of the game is so radically different, and the effect of threats of military violence have on the players is also so radically different. So it's weird. We complain about in Eclipse how everything seems to build up to one huge military conflagration near the end. But part of that is kind of okay if the threats are internalized and you're making the dance of trying to upgrade your fleet. Mostly when I think about Eclipse, though, the things that it does badly, Voidfall does really, really well. But the things that Eclipse does well, no other game does. That aspect of ship customization, of kitting out your fleet to do very specific things to take on specific opponents, no other game comes close. But when it comes to things like exploration, when it comes to things about the bizarre luck of the draw that can completely hose you, Voidfall doesn't have any of those problems. So I agree with you that in one way they're very, very similar, but in terms of overall play experience, I'd say they're pretty far apart.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're just sort of that bracket of, we're going to play a big 4X type space game.
Yep.
I think they just sort of fall into that same category. We're going to play either this or that. And
I would also say that for me, and this is going to be a bit of a controversial take, I don't think they're in the same broad category in terms of playtime. You can set up, teach, and tear down a game of Eclipse if you're even remotely disciplined in 3 hours. You cannot do that with Voidfall. If everybody knows what they're doing and the game is already set up and you're playing with discipline, yeah, you might be able to get Voidfall done in 3 hours. But you might be able to get Eclipse done in the same context in about 2. And to me, there's a huge difference between a 2-hour game and a 3-hour game. There's also a big difference between a game that you can get done with discipline in 3 and a game that, with discipline, minimum, you're talking 4 to 5. That's my overall impression.
And that's Voidfall.
That is
game
Voidfall.
Reviewed exactly 1 year ago.
You haven't played it as much as I have since, because again, I've been playing with the Louis for the most part. We've played a couple times, and even that, given our schedule and given how difficult it is a bit of an accomplishment. Do you have any regrets about making Game of the Year?
No,
yeah?
not at all.
Good
Fond
stuff.
memories, and looking, like I said, just you talking about it, I wish we could get it to the table more often.
It is a bit of a lift. We should make the effort, though.
True.
And that is Voidfall by Nigel Buckle and David Turczi, a fabulous design team. They're also responsible for the Imperium Civilization deck building games. I absolutely love their work. I love their design idiom. It is exactly what I want crunchier Euros to look like. And so I'm looking forward to more collaboration going on. I remember back when Imperium, before it was published, and David Turczi would give these interviews. And at the time, I thought it was just hype. He's like, you have no idea how good this Nigel Buckle guy is. Like, you have no clue. I'm like, yeah, sure. You're being nice to your co-designer / this is marketing hype. I believe him now.
Apparently there's some sort of online implementation for Voidfall. Like, I know nothing about it. I've just heard people talking about it on the Discord.
It's impressive, but still very awkward in the way the digital implementations are. And I will just say the same thing that I've said a million times in a million different contexts about digital implementations. One of the things that I find so disorienting is internalizing the game state. And there's so much information to process in the context of a game of Voidfall. How the hexes look, what your opponents are up to, what your own board looks like, what your cards have available, this, that, and the other. Ugh. So I looked at it. I took a look at the digital implementation. Extremely impressive. Not something I want to spend time with. But if you like that kind of stuff, yes, it's very well done. I recommend it in that sense. So that's the AYURIS. Moving on to what we played last week. Walker, what did you play last week?
Mark, you and I got to play Shackleton Base again. It's a journey to the moon, don't you know?
It's Shackleton Base, A Journey to the Moon.
This is designed by Fabio Lopiano and Nestore Mangone, published by Pandasaurus Games here in North America, and we played with some of the new corporations. We had the...
Well, new to us, not...
No.
The base game comes with a set of corporations.
We busted out of Baby's first Shackleton.
Yes.
And we played with the plant greenhouses.
The farm people, the tourist people again, and the robot people. Well, they're not really robot people. They're people who make robots.
The robots.
The robots aren't people.
So robots are, like, you build a bunch of factories and they're manned by robots?
That's desperately unfortunate. Staffed or crewed, I would say.
Crewed by robots.
I was surprised that was listed as Complexity 2.
True.
Because it really didn't seem any more complicated than the Complexity 1 corporations. And frankly, I would make a case that the tourist module is probably closer to Complexity 2 than the robot module is. But setting that aside.
Yeah, so there's 3 sort of levels of factory you can get for the robots, sort of endgame scoring, immediate bonus, or bonus that you get every time you do a particular type of action. And you get robots with the robot module. Who knew?
You get robots, Walker.
And they sort of clip into the little factories, and so they're now functional, and they do what they do. And Shackleton Base continues to be a delight.
For me, delight is a bit strong. I would say that this second play is revealing that I think the overall play space is not as satisfying to me or as well calibrated as Autobahn was, which was the previous design by those two designers, and another medium-heavy Euro, and one that I think is very, very well done, probably one of the best medium-heavy Euros of the past 5 years. The reason why I have misgivings about Shackleton Base, I find it perfectly enjoyable. It's very good. It's very solid. But one of my original complaints about Shackleton Base with the original was that there wasn't really a whole lot of player interaction. The shared play space wasn't exploited very much because you can build modules and buildings on the shared moon base, and you can send out workers to activate rows of hexes. If you're present in the hex, there's no cost associated. But if you're not there and someone else is, you pay whoever has the biggest building there. And this often doesn't matter a whole lot. We're talking about a small number of payments that transfer, that change hands over the course of the game. So I was hoping that there was some opportunity for more competition over the board space. Enter the Farm Corporation. The Farm Corporation adds bonuses to a hex. And at the end of the round, whoever has the most overall presence in that row if there were workers sent there, gets a bonus in terms of points or reputation, which often amounts to points. And so I was like, oh, I thought this was great. Okay, finally, we're going to have more competition. Someone's going to worry about building a farm there because you have to build it when there's room. But then that row is immediately more appealing, and so you start building buildings to start winning the farm. But the thing is that all the farms that got built were put in rows that were then quickly locked down. The period of competition on the board was extremely brief.
True. It was their second game for most of the players, and so it was like, now we're going to build a big building. We didn't build the big building in the first game.
Right.
Now we're going to build a big building. So like you said, in that locked down a row and sort of, doubled up on this plant corporation that we introduced. Yeah.
And the building restrictions meant that even if there was still room left in the row or column, we could quickly do the math and figure out that there was no way that anyone was going to be able to take that from us. And even if there was a risk that they might, in very strange circumstance, build the precise configuration of buildings to threaten our presence there, we could plug up those holes with more farms. So here we are, we're leading in the row. We cement our lead in the row by plugging it up with more farms, and that's just guaranteed income for the rest of the game, more or less. And so what I hoped would lead to more competition on the main board and more player interaction led to less player interaction on the main board, and which says to me, at least, that the bones of Shackleton Base aren't as robust as I hoped they would be. The different corporations are kind of okay, but frankly, the robot one I think is a good example. It's like, okay, you can just buy these things that give you more bennies, as opposed to another corporation which says you can buy these things to give you more bennies, but you buy them with a slightly different currency that it introduces in the game. Or another corporation that does the same thing, but you buy things slightly differently again. And so what I thought was a potentially promising system that might have a configuration that would lead to slightly better exploitation of the sort of dynamics that I want in a game of this ilk, I'm not sure that Shackleton Maze can give that to me. And so I think that certainly when compared to Audubon, it is of a lower caliber. I enjoy it. It's fine. It's solid. It's pleasant. I don't think it's degenerate or anything. It's just that mostly it's a more heads down sort of a maximizing efficiency engine thing than I would have hoped.
We got to say that there was some graphic design choices for the farm module that were kind of disappointing as well, because they wanted to make these buildings look like they were little greenhouses. Therefore, they added a little greenery onto the tile. Unfortunately, they used the exact same icon as get grass income.
Yes.
So when it looks as though you get all of the bonuses on that tile, it like any other game, it looks as though you get more grass income. And
yeah, it was a little bit.
Unfortunately, that is not the case.
We figured it out.
Yes, but I just mean it's just a bad choice. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm curious to see the other corporations, the ones that are complexity 3 and 4, look even yet more bizarre. Maybe that will introduce some genuinely new dynamics that will intrigue me. But as it is, this was one of those second plays where it's like, oh, maybe there isn't as much to this as I hoped, which is a bit disappointing, frankly. That is Shackleton Base, The Journey of the Moon by Fabio Lopiano and Nestore Mangone, originally published by Sorry, We Are French. I got to play Cthulhu Death May Die, Fear of the Unknown. So this is the second Kickstarter that was run by Coleman or Not for Cthulhu Death May Die. The third one is, shall we say, kind of lost in time and space. I'm now in a position to be very self-congratulatory, Walker, just by chance, because the third Kickstarter launched. I had that momentary completionist urge, because after all, I'm a big fan of Cthulhu Death May Die, but then I thought, you know what? I have enough Cthulhu Death May Die. And then a few months later, CMON says, we are basically a Ponzi scheme, borderline criminal operation. I think we're done here. It's like, ooh, that's a lot of projects that are very uncertain now. So Cthulhu Death May Die, and Fear of the Unknown as well, is by Rob Daviau, Eric Lang, and Marco Portugal, and it is a cooperative scenario-based game of Cthulhu pulp adventure. And I asked, speaking about the Louis in the context of Voidfall, I asked one of the two Louis what he felt like playing, because the Louis, they will reliably play whatever you put in front of their face. But every once in a while, I like to be like, you can ask for things. I'm more than happy to play whatever you like. And he said, oh, yeah, I'd like to play that, that adventure game where there's sometimes combat. It's something Cthulhu Death May Die-ish. I'm like, oh, okay, a game like Cthulhu Death May Die. Do you remember the theme? And he said, I just told you, it's Cthulhu. And I'm like, oh, you didn't mean a game like Cthulhu Death May Die-ish. You meant Cthulhu Death May Die. And he's like, yeah, I couldn't remember the name. It's like, no, you did remember the name. But you were thinking you didn't remember the name, confused the living heck out of me. Anyway, so got to play one of the scenarios from Season 3. There are now 4 seasons of Cthulhu Death May Die that have been published. There were supposed to be more, but who knows if those will see the light of day. This was a weird one where basically we were in Dracula's castle, but disrupting a ritual that he had nothing to do with. He wasn't a big fan of these cultists coming in and wrecking his stuff, so we're like making friends with the vampires so we can eject the cultists, who in this case we're attempting to summon Nyarlathotep. And this is our first experience with Nyarlathotep, who is unique amongst the Great Old Ones in that he starts out on the board. Normally in a game of Cthulhu Death May Die, one of the great things about Cthulhu Death May Die is, in addition to the scenarios that really change things up and offer a really modular experience, an entirely new encounter deck, a new mythos deck, a new map setup, a new set of special rules that are very straightforward, but nonetheless evocative of what we were trying to do. In the context of this particular scenario, we were trying to assemble enough explosives to blow up sections of Dracula's castle so that the cultists couldn't proceed.
A lot of missions of accumulating explosives and blowing stuff up.
I said it was pulp adventure.
Yep.
It's pulp adventure during the 1920s. It's entirely appropriate. You got Tommy guns and dynamite. It's great. And the effect of Nyarlathotep is normally the Great Old One shows up on the map either when a certain amount of time has passed or when you've disrupted the ritual. But in the case of Nyarlathotep, he's got his human form wandering around setting fires. And then when you disrupt the ritual, his winged horror version emerges, and he's one of the biggest Great Old One miniatures in a game of relatively large Great Old One miniatures. Anyway, Huey and I are big fans of Nyarlathotep. He's one of the more interesting figures in the Cthulhu mythos. So I was very happy to see how he worked, and it was cool. We did not do well. I ended up dying very badly before time was up. This was a scenario that gave a lot of wounds because there were a lot of circumstances in which you would get wounded. And so despite the fact that I played as Harry Houdini, who famously was apocryphally killed by a Canadian boxer, he was not able to escape the fate of dying from too many wounds. So alas, such is the way of things. Big fan of Cthulhu Death May Die. Immediately after finishing playing, Louis suggested that we leave the game semi-set up and so we can try the same scenario again this week. And so that is what we will be doing. So more reports on that. Cthulhu Death May Die, specifically the Fear of the Unknown expansion, published in 2024 by, well, whatever's left of Cool Mini or Not.
This week's stream was Barony, designed by Marc André and published by Madagot, and we played with both expansions. There's a Heroes expansion that just came out with the new edition, which also works with the first edition, which is the one we played, and we also played with the Sorcery expansion. And it was not a good experience. Not only was it a bad experience of Barony, it was just a bad game experience overall. Anyway, so let's take this Barony, which I love, which is a no-luck, open information game. And we're going to add these hero cards. Everyone is dealt 4, and you get to keep 2. And they're secret. Oh. So now in this open information game, we now have secret things that are going to suddenly pop up and change things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you give me an example of...
Oh, well, one of the main things you do, which progresses the end of the game and gets you points, is a very vital sort of timing thing. When am I going to take a turn to cash in 15 of my tokens in order to advance my marker? One of them says you only need 12.
Wild.
And there's 2 copies of each card. And so if you dealt 2 of the same, you're allowed to keep both. So the same player had 2 of these cards.
Okay.
So the game ended very abruptly.
Oh my goodness.
The sorcery is not too bad. I've only played this the second time. I would never play with any of these expansions if I ever play Barony again, because I remember this was not a good experience. I remember the last time, if I go back and listen to the last time I played Barony, I don't remember it being a good experience either.
It is very, very hard to make expansions for a game like Barony, because it is a very simple rule set, a very tight list of units and what they can do. And it's basically it's almost a positional abstract because, as you say, it's open information and no luck. And it's all about timing and positioning.
Yeah, you're threatening areas. Because when you put out villages, if someone takes your villages, they get to take your scoring tokens. So you got to figure out if you have time to cash in those tokens or or time to spawn some new knights and protect your areas, or spawn knights and get to other people's villages before they have a time to react. It's very much knowing exactly what people are able to do and utilizing threatening areas and timing. And you start playing with that, and no bueno. So anyway, that was...
We going international now? Every time I speak French, you look at me with the stink face, and now we can do other languages? Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So that's Barony. You can always check out... It was on stream, so if you want to check out our game, you can go to our YouTube Live tab and check it out. It is one of my sort of favorite games, or was.
It's hard to mess with something so simple. And sometimes simple is best.
And the new second edition just came out, so you'll be able to check that out.
And the new second edition has both expansions packed in, yes?
As far as I know.
Yeah. All right, so here's the deal, Walker. Let's talk about Netrunner.
System Gateway.
Let's talk about Netrunner. Netrunner is one of those games. It's one of those games where if you play the game and you say you don't like it, the people crawl out of the woodwork.
Yes.
All right? Now, to be fair, there are games like this that I enjoy. I get the impression that Innovation has a similar fan base.
Yes.
Right? They're the people who emerge. Here's the thing. This time, the people were right. Because it turns out that... I'm going to set aside the first time I played Netrunner. The first time I played Netrunner was shortly after the FFG relaunch. It was a while ago. My memories are dim. And I was literally playing from the starter set, and people have misgivings about the starter set. The second time I played Netrunner was only a few years ago, and it was being introduced by a huge fan of Netrunner, and that was actually the downfall of the introductory experience. I kind of got the sense of that at the time, but in hindsight, it's now very clear. The person who showed it to me, a very fine human being. I have a great deal of affection and regard for him, and he did a not good job of showing me Netrunner.
Yeah, I think I've had the same experiences. They want you to bring you up to speed immediately.
Yeah.
They enjoy Netrunner. They have all these cards. They would like to use all of these cards.
They built this cute deck.
Yes.
It's got all these cool gimmicks.
Yes.
And it's neat stuff. It's like, oh, check out this cool thing. It's like, what? What's
yes,
going...
Exactly.
Oh, okay. So here's the thing. System Gateway is the new starter set for the third iteration of Netrunner. There was Netrunner back in the day, then there was Fantasy Flight's Netrunner, and now there's Netrunner from Null Signal Games, which is basically a fan project to keep Netrunner alive.
Yeah, I wish they'd remove that, though, because it makes the entry on Board Game Geek very confusing. It says a fan-made expansion, but it's the starter set. So when you're trying to figure out what you need to get to play, and this is an expansion, I don't want that, I want the base game. Anyway.
It's somewhat badly labeled.
Yeah.
But despite the labeling, I think that Netrunner System Gateway may be the finest introductory set of anything that I've seen since Warhammer Underworlds. Because it does a fabulous job of presenting you with a deck that is sufficiently bone simple and yet gives you a sense of the dynamics of how Netrunner actually works. Because for the first time, I understood how my deck worked. I understood how your deck worked, because part of the business of Netrunner is that it is a constructed card game with heavy asymmetry. You're a corporation, or you're the runner trying to steal from that corporation. And effectively, the fundamental victory dynamics of your sort of basic deck, because of course you can build a deck that can do all manner of crazy things. That was one of the problems with my past experience. I was handed a deck that was meant to win by a strange way, and it just it was overwhelming, and I didn't quite internalize what was going on. But here, there's a small variety of cards, and it's sufficiently predictable, therefore, that you can get a handle on what's going on after a couple rounds. We played 2 games back to back. The game can end unsatisfyingly because there's a lot of sort of bluff and risk and gamble, but that's okay. That's tolerable. So for the very first time, I got a sense of how this Netrunner thing works. As the corporation, what you're doing is you're sometimes laying traps, but you're trying to advance these agendas and score things before the runner can steal things from you. And as the runner, you have to take risks and flip over cards, and you may not know what they do. Try to hedge your bets and have some recourse if it goes badly.
Make sure you have a lot of cards in your hand.
Make sure you have cards in your hand, because you can die. You can just have your brain be fried by a corporation trap. That happened once in our first game and almost happened in our second game. There's a lot of luck involved, and I want to separate it out into 2 buckets. One bucket I'm kind of okay with, one bucket I'm not okay with. The bucket that I'm kind of okay with, given how long the game of Netrunner takes, at least in our experience with the sort of babies version, as the runner, one of the things you can do is launch a run on your opponent's deck. Of course, it's not called a deck.
Don't be silly.
It's called R&D because the Netrunner loves its silly terminology. And to a certain extent, Null Signal Games had no ability to change this because they wanted to make sure that everything was consistent with past versions. And also, the superfans of Netrunner will insist that it adds considerably to the play experience. I'm sorry, Corporation Deck would have done just fine. But anyway, if you do a successful run on the Corporation Deck, and as the Corporation, you can defend your draw deck just like you defend any other thing that the runner might go after. They get to look at the top card, and if the top card can be trashed, they can pay some resources to trash it. Otherwise, they just know what it is. But if it's a victory card, they score it. And Walker effectively top-decked twice and won the game. Because that's just happened to be where the cards were. Now, should I have defended my deck better? Absolutely. Look, I'm not going to say that it's totally random. But there's a certain amount of arbitrariness because if you do that successful run on the Corporation deck, it might get you absolutely nothing. It might give you a substantial portion of the points you need to win the game. That part, I'm actually kind of okay with. Whatever. While things are happening, it's a card game, there's luck of the draw. Here's the part that I'm not terribly keen on. And that is fundamental to the constructed deck format. When you are building a deck, there are heuristics you can follow. But at the end of the day, the fundamental issue of mana screw, which is the term in the context of Magic the Gathering, is just endemic to the genre in lots of different ways. What do I mean by this? Well, as an example, as a corporation, you need to have agendas to advance and score. If you draw too many, that's a huge problem. If you draw too few, that's a huge problem. As the runner, you need icebreakers in order to be able to defeat the defensive operations of the corporation. If you draw too many, that's a huge problem. If you draw too few, that's a huge problem. And this is just a couple of examples. There are like 2 or 3 different parameters on which you need to draw them on a reliable basis. And so consequently, I have to say, as enthusiastic as I am about our experiences with Netrunner System Gateway, and I'd happily play again, I might even be willing to tinker with some fundamentals of deck design. I can't help but wonder, compared to a game like Air, Land, and Sea, what am I gaining? What am I gaining? What am I losing? Well, I'm losing in terms of, again, far more randomness in terms of various flavors of mana screw. I'm losing in terms of the fact that there's a very, very daunting set of technical terminology. It's much less accessible. It's much less approachable. And I just don't know if it's worth it, frankly, because Air, Land, and Sea by John Perry is similarly a fabulous game of bluff, of risk, of head-to-head confrontation, but unburdened by a lot of these other things. Is it as complicated or as in-depth or as robust? Absolutely not. It's not a universe that has 1,000,001 possible cards. But as I say, that's kind of a double-edged sword. Anyway, that's where I'm sitting with Netrunner System Gateway. I feel much, much better about Netrunner now than I ever have. But even as we were playing the second game, I couldn't help but think, I wish this weren't a constructible card game with all of the burdens attached to that.
I'm wondering if its popularity is sort of like, we play Magic all the time. Now there's this other game, and so Magic users sort of gravitate to it because they're into deck building. They have time to do this. They have and now it's only 2 different games they have to worry about.
That is an interesting hypothesis. I would be surprised because in my experience, people who are into Magic are really into Magic. True. And don't want to play something like Magic. They just want to play more Magic.
True. It's in the current sort of state of board games where it's a sort of cycle into new stuff and I just can't see where a deck builder fits in there. Like
a deck construction game.
Yeah, deck construction. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Sorry, yes, to be precise.
Well, because deck builder now is ambiguous between games like Dominion and games like Magic the Gathering. Yeah.
But since I've decided to pick up a set just so we could, because we're at the same level. Like, we've both played 2 games. Yes. You know what I mean? I'm not playing against someone that's been playing it for years.
It's true.
And so when we build our decks, we'll generally in the same area. And so it'll be interesting and fun. Whereas if it's like I pick this up with somebody that's been playing for years, it would be...
Yeah.
It wouldn't be fun, and it would be quickly thrown out the side.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe Maybe there's a little bit more latitude than I'm giving it credit for. Again, because of this influx of randomness, maybe it is the case that because you're fundamentally going to be playing a game of cat and mouse, regardless of who plays Corp and who plays Runner, that there's a little bit more room for players of disparate skill level. I just got to say, though, that when it comes to just face-to-face card games, I'd rather play Airland and Sea. When it comes to deck construction games, I'd much rather play Sakura Arms or something of that nature, right? There are so many good two-player head-to-head asymmetric / limited construction games.
I'm just saying, there's so many funnels for this Netrunner.
What do you mean funnels?
I just mean like one, it's only 2-player. One, like I said, you're going to have people at different skill levels. It's very difficult to a person that's played a lot versus someone that's never played.
All that having been said, there is still the community. This game refuses to die. It keeps coming back.
Yeah, it's true.
And as I say, I am now in a position where I can kind of understand why. You made the same comment. It's like, now I finally understand. Like this seems to be far more than just another Magic knockoff. This seems far more robust and interesting than a lot of these other combat-style deck construction games. I just wonder, in a hobbyist mindset, whether the additional burdens that you're leveraging and the fundamental things about deck construction that I find so unsatisfying. Like, you're building like a 40-plus card deck, and you need a certain ratio to come at the right times in order for your deck to function. And at the end of the day, you're just like, okay, well, that means that I should probably have 4 of this card in the deck. Maybe I'll get it at the right rate. Maybe I'll get them all at the same time. Who knows? And that's the part that I just don't find as satisfying, frankly. And it gets a lot right. It's very interesting. I can see why it survived, but it's got some competition.
And I just want to make sure people understand that we want to know all the net players out there. We want to know your comments, but the only Netrunner comments we're reading are the ones that are sent to aircanada.com.
Yeah.
So you have to send them there, else we do not see them.
It's true. Otherwise, our ice automatically intercepts it. It's a huge problem.
Yeah, it's bad.
But look, this is one of those times where, in particular, our patrons were saying, look, there's this new... And look, as far as starter sets go, again, System Gateway, the starter decks are really, really well calibrated to make it revealing as to the full scope of the game, but at the same time approachable. So that's a bit of a triumph. It's also super economical because rather than a small box, it's just a tuck box full of cards. And they set it up, here are your starter decks. Here's the baby version. Here are the cards you add to your starter decks to play the full version, albeit in a somewhat baby deck. And now, here's about 100 extra cards you can play with for deck construction. There you go, rulebooks online. I'm of two... rulebooks not being in the base game box really annoys me, but if in the process you can get your card game down to just a tuck box and make it this inexpensive, like 20 Canadian bucks, okay, that's a price I'll be willing to pay. They've also done, for what it's worth, as a final note, Null Signal Games has made the rulebook very good. It's very simple to read.
I feel as though
very understandable.
It's like a living rulebook, I'm sure. Much like, the Blood Bowl living rulebook. I'm sure it's being updated and tinkered with continuously.
Yes, but...
Not changed. I mean, just worded to make it more clear.
Right, but the Blood Bowl living rulebook continues to sprawl. Right? It's hard for a rulebook to evolve over the course of, say, almost 30 years, maybe even more than 30 years in the context of Netrunner. And now they've got it. Again, this base presentation in System Gateway is so tight that it makes the game so much more approachable and accessible to so many people. It is really well done. Again, I'm hard-pressed. Like, Warhammer Underworlds did a great job of having a starter set. Indeed, the game itself of Warhammer Underworlds is so much easier to do a starter set for because there's no army building, and at the time when the game was launched, there was no card meta. But for an evolving system, I think System Gateway is a triumph. So if you're all curious, if you like two-player card games, if you like deck construction games, or if you're curious about deck construction games, I don't think that Netrunner System Gateway has any serious competition for a great entry point to a large meta card game like this. And kudos to Null Signal Games and everyone involved for keeping the game alive. Hats off to the Netrunner community. So, this is Netrunner System Gateway. The list of design credits is very long because this is a very large project-based work, but whatever. Zoe Cohen, McGregor Crowley, June Valencia Cuervo, Max Chippington Derrick, Gregory Tongue, and Jade Wesley.
So I got a crowdfunding project in called Plain PETA, or at least we think it Could be plain pita.
I don't think it's pronounced that way. It's Japanese, so I think it's plana pita. I don't know what the pita is doing, but it's like planet. It's like plana. So it's plana pita, I think.
I don't know. I think it's like an allergy problem, so you keep it plain. So
No,
it's
not.
Plain
That's not.
pita.
It's not spelt plain that way anyway. It can't be that way. And in Japanese, you wouldn't say plain. You would say plana. So there you go.
This design by
Daisuke Fujinawa and Kazunori Hori, yes.
Published by Spitzlab.
Yeah, there's not enough vowels in the company name. I have no idea. I'm not even going to venture a guess as to how to say the company name.
And man, is this? Did they hear? Did they listen to our show, Marc? We have magnets and we have flicking. This is our jam. And in fact, it delivered what it promised, and it's plain like the pita that's in the box.
My goodness, Walker.
And
it's
simple.
not pronounced that way.
I know.
And it's not. What are you doing?
Right. It's nice and straightforward. You have your 4 discs, and you're flicking them into this sort of crocono. It's crocono in space.
Very teeny, very tiny little circle board.
Little metal. It's got some metal in it because your flicking discs have a magnet in them. So you can flick it on whatever side you like. So it can either like slow down immediately as soon as it enters the board or slide like a regular
wooden disc. Yeah.
Wooden disc. What is the name of the guy in the middle? I've forgotten already. There is the jammer. The jammer. The evil jammer is put into the middle, and he serves multiple purposes. The main purpose is on face up your discs. They have your guys are awake, and so anyone that's in his zone, you're not allowed to flip over because once you flick, you may flip your disc over, which will sort of lock them in place on the board.
Yeah, because it's fascinating. The friction, the amount of force exerted means that it is very difficult to move a disc that is magnetically adhered to the board. So if you flip them face down, or if you flick them face down in the first instance, they're going to stop and pretty much stick there for the rest of there. So what you want to do is get your disc in an advantage position, usually by flicking it face up, and then flip it face down so it locks to where you want it to be. But you can't do that if you end where the jammer is, and the jammer starts in the most valuable scoring position, namely the center.
So flip down discs, it's sort of area majority once everyone's flick their 4 discs. And so face down discs are only worth 1 power. Face up discs are worth 2 power. Whoever has the most will win the points for that particular ring. And if it's a tie, it just builds up. The victory points stay there, and you add another token, and it'll be worth double in the next round. And that's where it kind of falls apart for me.
A little bit, yeah.
Is, because we had one round where the center was worth 15 points, and anyway, overall,
ties are extremely common. As a rule, every round, one of the 3 zones would score, and the other 2 would tie out.
Yeah.
Because scoring is very coarse, and once a disc is flipped face down, it is very difficult, almost impossible to dislodge it, which is cool. It leads to an evolving geography. It leads to some tactical considerations about how to get your discs face down in various parts so that they can be roadblocks and stick there until end of scoring. But ultimately, I wish that the scoring had been a little bit more robust. Maybe if the discs had different values, maybe if the board were larger and had more scoring zones, I don't know. But as it is, on first play with 3 players, I really enjoyed all the conceits about play in Planet Pita, but the scoring did not leave me satisfied at all. Especially since the worst part about it wasn't even just the rounds kept escalating, and so the only round of consequence might be the last round or even the second round. It's that usually about 2 flicks before the end of a given round, you'd be able to look at the board and figure out how it was going to shake out. That's not ideal.
Yeah, and the other thing the jammer does is he clears all discs that are in his zone that are face up. So any of your double scoring discs everything gets wiped in the zone that he's in, unless they're face down. So,
very different game, but this is making me want to play Sonora again. Remember Sonora? It was
Sonora
the flick and
great.
right.
Another Pandasaurus game. Not that this is Pandasaurus.
Right.
But I mean, they're constantly putting out fantastic games.
I don't know about constantly, and I don't know about fantastic. Yeah, solid publisher, absolutely. Yeah, Planet Pita was certainly very quick. I'd be interested in trying it again, especially with 4 players or with 2. Maybe in either of those configurations it might be more interesting. But I really did like the dynamics of the physicality and the scoring conditions of face-up versus face-down pieces. I think that was exploited very well.
There is also a Majul that maybe will help.
Oh, a Majul, you said?
There is a Majul.
That is, sorry, just for those of you that don't find this transparent, and in my experience, no one does, Majul is how I say module. because I have something bordering between a sense of humor and a speech impediment. Right in between those two, that's me. That's what I got.
So when there's a tie, you can give the tied players these ×2 tokens. And on the next round, when they flick a disc, they're allowed to put this ×2 token on the disc, and it will make it worth twice the power.
I see. Okay. Well, that would definitely address one of my other concerns, because in a 3-player game, if the tie is prompted by players A and B, then player C just profits, because they didn't devote any of their pieces towards tying up the zone, and none of their opponents scored off of their efforts, so it's just gravy for them. I would be interested in trying this module of which you speak.
I'm sure we'll be playing it multiple times.
Yes, I'm looking forward to trying it again, seeing if these same degenerate scoring dynamics work out again. And frankly, even if they do, I'd be more than happy to play, because magnets, flicking and magnets.
Yeah, exactly.
Flicking and magnets. We played Alien Fate of the Nostromo again, and I couldn't really remember the dynamics of Alien Fate of the Nostromo, and I was certainly reminded about why I don't like the game very quickly on into playing it, because Alien Fate of the Nostromo, in one sense, it's very thematic. It's got lovely pictures of all the crew members of the first movie, and of course it's got plastic minis of the xenomorph as well as the crew members. There's a very thematic bit about, trying to chase down Jonesy the cat, and how the cat may indeed cause you to lose because cats are hateful, vicious, vindictive creatures who are nonetheless adorable. But here's the thing. Fundamentally, Alien Fate of the Nostromo is a pick-up-and-deliver game. Fine. That's not my objection. I don't demand that a game about Alien be about, combat or something. That isn't even in keeping with the movie. But I don't even really know how you make victory conditions associated with a game like Alien. But the way that the objectives work, you pull out one objective per player plus one, and they take some version of deliver some item that you crafted or some amount of scrap, which is the resource, to a given room. Here's the problem. At the end of everyone's turn, you pull a card which directs the alien to move, or there might be some sort of event. Broadly speaking, the way the game operates is the alien is shunting around in semi-random locations, so you end up with these bizarre roadblocks that don't make a whole lot of sense. The alien's over there, the alien's over there, the alien's over there, the alien's on my way to the commute, the alien's on my way to the toilet, I can't go there anymore, okay. And on top of that, there are events that just flatly say everyone loses a scrap. It's like, okay, well, one of the mission objectives that comes up an awful lot, there's not a whole lot of objectives, is the team meeting, which I would point out could have been an email, but whatever. Where everyone has to be... Should have been an email. Everyone has to be in the same place with one scrap each. Okay, well, you got one event saying that everyone loses a scrap. You've got these other events that's sending the alien here, there, and everywhere. And so the ability to get all, certainly if you're playing with 5, as we were, all 5 players in the same place, whew. Now, we did end up winning, which was a shock to almost everyone involved. We were all pretty convinced that we were done for. But ultimately, it was largely because when the particularly pernicious events come up, it's a question of when they show up. It's just really obnoxious to be constantly fighting against this tide of this resource deprivation and this weird arbitrariness where people are just showing up in awkward places and getting from point A to point B is not particularly satisfied and is subject to random factors. So that's my continuing impression of Alien Fate of the Nostromo.
I kind of enjoyed it only because it seems as though everyone but us was really enjoying it. Not, I shouldn't say really, was enjoying it.
Okay, well, Louis got to set the xenomorph on fire with the flamethrower. That's fine. He got to get his yayas out. That's good. I'm very glad.
They all seemed very excited that we had won at the end. So it seemed as though
it was just shock. I don't know.
Maybe it was shock. I'm not sure. They seemed to semi-enjoy it. The request was made. We want a science fiction game.
A science fiction co-op game for 5
players.
Yes.
And so the pool was awfully shallow.
It's true. No, it definitely met that condition. It wasn't over long. We played a game that's about as long as it could get because we were one space away from loss on the morale track, and we got to the final mission and succeeded it. And it still wasn't very long. We also had a time constraint. Yes, given the constraints, Alien Fate of the Nostromo did very, very well. Yes. I still don't want to play it. It's just,
ever again.
Yeah, it's super arbitrary and unsatisfying. I do not appreciate it.
And the comment was great. It's like, if this game came out in 1985, it would have been amazing.
It's true. Alien Fate of the Nostromo by Scott Rogers, published by Ravensburger in 2021. Finally, we played Endeavor Deep Sea. This is the quasi sort of second edition of Endeavor, designed by Carl DeVisser and Jarrett Gray, published by Burnt Island Games last year. There's an expansion that was recently up on crowdfunding for a 5th player. There are serious misgivings about Endeavor Deep Sea at higher player counts, and I can certainly understand that because the game doesn't do a whole lot to stagger for different player counts. And so you end up getting very different experiences based on how you play. This is only my second time playing, and we were playing with 3 players both times, and in both of those instances, the map kind of sort of fills out in a relatively satisfying way, but there's still more room to explore. I have to say that I appreciate what Deep Sea does to the Endeavor formula, but part of me appreciates the very simple, streamlined nature of Endeavor. Let me give you just one example in ways in which Endeavor is a very tight, neatly defined system, and Deep Sea kind of sprawls a little bit. At any given time, you can always track to see what your resources are in Endeavor. There's never any stuff that needs to be tracked. It's all just a question of, I've got these tokens that I've accumulated. This is my status of my cards. Okay, my building value is 7, for example. In the context of Deep Sea, the universe of possible effects has kind of exploded to a certain extent. Cards now work very, very differently. There's a whole bunch of different ways to get extra icons through various token placement. There's a whole bunch of ways to get upgrades and track advancements through just moving your submarine around. And consequently, it's a much larger system of effects. And while I appreciate that, again, part of me really appreciates the sort of stripped down, slightly more confrontational feeling approach that Endeavor takes. I will say, though, that I do appreciate that more and more games are looking at their first editions with their unapologetic colonialist trappings and really interrogating them. Now, Endeavor is not a neat example of that because Endeavor did a very, very good job of trying to grapple with the ills of slavery, which is one of the many, many ills of colonialism. So it's not quite a straightforward hagiography of the march of colonial greatness that many Euros of its ilk were. But nonetheless, moving it to a sort of abstracted deep sea exploration thing where you're saving turtles instead of dominating indigenous peoples does seem like a natural choice. I don't know. I'm curious to try it some more. Like the fundamental core of Endeavor, of you're managing these discs and hiring these new people or building buildings in the case of the original Endeavor and using that to open up new spots. It's very neat and it feels streamlined in a very satisfying way and it does tracks pretty well. But part of me wonders which one I prefer, and I think I prefer the original. But I'm curious to explore more of Endeavor Deep Sea, suffice to say.
I like how the actions are very simple, so the flow is very good. And at the beginning of the round, you just sort of like work down your board quickly, get discs, remove discs.
The structure is really
Here's
good,
your pool, pick a new employee, and the fact that you get to upgrade the employees. Do you upgrade buildings in Endeavor?
No.
I couldn't remember, no. So that's a neat.
Oh, yeah, there's more stuff, and the new stuff is generally pretty good. A lot of it is pretty random, to be fair. Like a lot of what you'll be doing in Deep Sea is placing new ocean tiles, which will give you random effects and introduce random elements to the board. A lot of what you're doing is also, there are these dive tokens, which are just flatly random, that you pull blindly, and they might give you some amount of stuff. And very often I find myself in a position where, I've set up my employees based on what made sense at the time, but then 2 turns later is the board, in its random evolution, leaves me unable to exploit the things. Like, when I took this employee that gave me dive tokens, there were lots of dive tokens on the board. Now the dive tokens are gone, and this employee is borderline useless because all the new tiles that people placed don't have dive tokens. Either deliberately or maybe by accident. Who knows? It was random. So, I like the system. I like what they've done with the system. Part of me, I think, prefers the original version of the system, but part of me is also interested in trying out the other scenarios because, I don't know, I looked at some of the later scenarios. I've so far played Scenario 1 and Scenario 3. They didn't seem to be playing much with very interesting ideas in terms of how to differentiate themselves from scenario to scenario. And I took a glance at Scenario like 8 and 9, and they didn't seem to be doing a whole heck of a lot either, but I'd be interested in seeing whether I could be proven wrong.
I like how the map sort of gets built as you go. And we had some very interesting map tiles here that did different things that mixed up how you interact with the map. Not, out of this world things, but, breaks it up a little bit,
No, that's
right?
going to be the third Endeavor game.
Out of this world.
Normally, it's science fiction, then Deep Sea. They're going to reverse the trend. It's going to be Deep Sea, then into outer space.
Nice.
Actually, I could get behind a space-themed endeavor. Okay. I'm talking myself into it.
Nice. And that is Endeavor Deep Sea.
Now we're going to take a brief break to pay some bills. And we're back. Now on to the news and why it doesn't matter.
So Covenant's going to be coming out, designed by Germain P. Malin. He's designed some games that we enjoy, like Sabika and Batuku. He's also put out a game recently called Men Nefer that we haven't tried yet, but soon will. And Covenant, the graphic design and the art looks fantastic. Your dwarves, and Marc loves dwarves. And we're building stuff. And,
I have a great deal of affection for human dwarves. Fantasy dwarves, not so much.
So anyway, I'm looking forward to trying it. I've liked all his work so far. Covenant.
So for years, Eric Lang has been teasing his expansion to Blood Rage. And the Blood Rage property, along with all of the other Eric Lang properties under Cool Mini or Not, specifically, we're talking about Rising Sun, Ankh, and the Quest games, have been acquired, and now there's the announcement that Blood Rage Valhalla, which is the expandalone to Blood Rage, will see the light of day. Eric Lang says it's kind of a pseudo-sequel in that you could play Blood Rage and then play Blood Rage Valhalla immediately thereafter. I don't know. I am very enthusiastic about Blood Rage. I think it's a very cool game. I'm a big fan of it. Wish it could hit the table more. Locals seem to have soured on Blood Rage to a significant extent. I'm not among them. And I'm very keen to see what Valhalla does.
I'm cynical.
In general or about this?
Just about this.
Okay.
Because we now have this new company that has the rights to Blood Rage.
Yes.
And they look at this. It's like, oh, it's an expansion. And so just the people who already own Blood Rage will probably buy this. So that's not going to make us very much money. Let's make it a whole different game. So even the people that own Blood Rage will now buy this full-priced game and we'll make more money. This is how I look at it. I could be completely wrong.
Are they chomping on a cigar while they do it?
Yeah, you see?
Yeah, okay. These are 1920s gangsters at
Exactly.
Tycoon Games. Anyway, this is Tycoon Games. Tycoon Games is the company that's acquired the rights from Cool Mini or Not. Look, Eric Lang.
Did we update that? Did we look? Just make sure, because they could have changed their name again while we've been recording.
Okay, that's harsh but fair. Look, Eric Lang has been talking about for years how he had these ideas for a very substantial expansion that really fundamentally changed how the game is played. I do not blame them for upgrading it into a kind of an expandalone. And besides...
Oh, no, I don't blame them.
Okay.
They are in this to make money. That's why
shocked.
When they started a business.
I thought they were in it for the love of the game. I thought this was their ability to a charitable endeavor to bring joy to the hearts of little children everywhere. Yeah, I also respect the fact that given how long it's been since Blood Rage has been in active circulation, there's kind of a sense of obligation to reprint the base stuff too. And so that's a significant lift. I hope it works out. I mean, I like the product line. I like Blood Rage. I thought that Blood Rage was a good example of Cool Mini or Not working at their best because it was a series of functional, albeit very attractive minis that added to the table presence considerably. And the design was solid. This is not something that could always be said for minis heavy stuff. We soured on Cool Mini or Not as years went on, but I think back in their heyday they did some good stuff. I mean, even later on, like Ankh, I'll stand behind Ankh 100%. I think it's a fabulous game, but that was kind of the exception rather than rule near the tail end of things. I'm less cynical. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Apparently, Adrian Smith is back to do the art, so
yep,
that'll be good.
Yeah, they're trying to get the band back together.
Blood Rage Valhalla.
Yeah, just like Black Sabbath, getting everyone back together. And
lastly, for me, there's a game coming out soon called Little Soldiers, and you pretty well take your old school army men, set them up on the table with dishes and glasses and fruit bowls, and off they go and fight each other. I hope, and it looks like it's more produced, and it's not going to be.
So these are army men in a catering business of some kind?
No. Yeah, okay, and it looks like it's produced. It's like it won't be just this, rule book where you're rolling a bunch of dice. It looks like there's a card system. It looks like it's a well integrated sort of system. I'm very much looking forward to it.
People have been trying to do robust tabletop miniatures rule sets for green plastic army men for a while. I think it's a fertile field. I don't know that anyone's done a really good job of it yet. Finally, SwagCon.
Swagcon.
Congrès, sorry wrong about games, fun times, good vibes only, trends, rights, or human rights board game jamboree, July 25th, 26th, 27th in Kingston, Ontario. Good news, bad news, it's sold out. There are no more tickets left available. If you really want to come and you've got a good reason why you haven't bought a ticket yet so far, reach out. We may be able to squeeze you in or at least put you on a waiting list in terms of cancellations because Eventbrite, to the best of my understanding, does not allow for waiting lists, but we can maintain one. And so let us know. But for all of you that have signed up for SwagCon, news to follow. We've got our codes of conduct coming out just so you can know what to expect. And we are going to be spending a little bit more time considering what games we want to play, and I'll be looking to see whether there are any commissioners, overlords, or apotheoses of swag that want to call in their favors and have me teach them a game. SwagCon.
Swagcon.
Kingston, Ontario. So that is the news and why it doesn't matter. We are now moving on to our topic, which is setup and tear down. I have my first question for you, Walker.
I'm ready.
Okay. Which one do you hate more, setup or tear down?
Setup.
Okay, why?
Just because if it's not done properly, if it's not written properly in the rule book, it puts you in a confusing state. Or if the other players look as though you're confused, you know what I mean? They see it being confusing and it already puts them off right from the beginning.
I hate tear down more.
Really?
Yes, here's why. You have nothing to look forward to, and at least a badly written setup, you can then look to see how the game works and get some guidance about how to do it. Teardown, usually you're on your own. You start after making decisions about how to organize things from a top-down perspective. Sometimes that's easy, but sometimes that's really hard. Mostly, though, it's you don't have anything to look forward to.
Oh, I enjoy that.
It's just the grunt work. There's no game left. It's just, now there's all this stuff. One of the things that makes me the most happy, you know the thrill of bailing? Are you familiar with this? Sometimes there's nothing more pleasurable than just canceling something. And to me, on rare occasions, and I talked about this in the context of Cthulhu Death May Die, when Louis like, oh, you could just leave the game here and we can play it again. So he's like, great! And then I'm like already at the door. Like, I don't have to put everything away. It's also that one of the things we've been talking about over the course of setup is that many hands make for light work. In a lot of games, it's so much easier to delegate tasks for setup than it is for teardown. It is so much easier to be like, here, shuffle this deck of cards, than it is to be like, all right, here's how everything is going to be organized. Anyway, I vastly prefer setup to teardown.
I think our group has it down pretty well. I think when, teardown comes, we've sort of got a system down, and it seems to work fairly well. Yeah,
it's weird how when it comes time to tear down the game, like the final score is announced, in like a 4 or 5 player game, there is often, not always, but there's that one person who's like, that was great, thanks, and leaves. That is not pro-social behavior. Do you know what I'm talking about? You've experienced this, right?
Sorry,
I can think of a couple people in Kingston that are more prone to this than others, but it's just a thing that recurs. It's not good, it's bad.
It's bad.
Yeah.
It's part of the game.
So I have some historical notes. These are not representative, and it's not fair, but I think it might be evocative of a vibe. All right? Because you and I are looking forward to trying a game called Transgalactica. This is by Daniele Tascini, an Italian designer who's done some good work. And looking at Transgalactica, the rulebook struck me as very representative in a number of ways to your contemporary medium-weight Euro. The setup is 14 steps for general setup and 12 steps for personal setup. I have a strong...
This is after you've put all the stickers on, which is ridiculously substantial.
Yes, this is after, general setup, like assembling dials for some games or putting on stickers or punching all the components and sorting them, of course. This is an average game. I'm not going to... Assembly is a different question entirely. That's completely exogenous to setup, right? I have a strong sense that things weren't always this way, so I decided to pick some unfair comparison sets. Hansa Teutonica has 5 steps for general setup, 3 steps for personal setup, and the setup instructions constitute 2/3 of a page. To be yet even less fair, I looked at the rules for Tigris and Euphrates, the latest version, the one that was done by Wind River /Fantasy Flight // 3 steps for setup, half a page.
Yeah.
It's getting worse, I think. I think it's fair to say it's getting worse. And I think it's also getting worse in the sort of Lacerda /Feld /Italian Masters sphere of, Euro design, because Splotter games, although heavy and elaborate, don't tend to be that big on setup conditions sometimes. It's weird. Like, we'll get into this, but like, if it is the case that you have some sort of card organizer for Food Chain Magnate, it's not a big deal. If it isn't, it's a huge deal. But anyway.
I have very few specific examples, more just general examples. I'm mostly just going to have like 2 games.
Okay.
That one that does everything very well,
yep,
which will be Shackleton base.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
And one that does things very badly, which will be Great Western Trail New Zealand.
Oh, geez. Those are 2 good examples, yeah. Similar weight games, both released in the past few years. Similar kind of design idiom in a number of fashions, but yes. So go on.
So the first one is, and not every point corresponds to these games. So my first thing I've written down is just too many decks of cards. It's like, say if it's a deck builder or whatever it is, we need 14 piles of cards, and they all need to be shuffled. Great Western Trail New Zealand does do this. You have like so many. They've added deck building into Great Western Trail, so now you have to decide which subset of cards you're going to have, and then you got to, get those star cards out, deal those cards out, get those in their decks, give another set of cards little symbol modifiers. I think it's like a barrel, a wheel, and something else, a bell, and then you have to get your sheep deck ready, and then your personal cards ready, and not only that, in the organizer they don't really give you spots for all these. They give you spots for cards, but just sort of get them in there because they're not going to line up right, and so now you have to sort all these cards and then get them ready. Awful.
I have here written in all caps, this is a term that I've invented. It's a medical term. It is a sense of gloom, angst, and dread associated with the prospect of setting up a game with many, many decks of cards.
Yes.
It is, my German pronunciation is not great, but is der Schuffeln.
Der Schuffeln.
Der Schuffeln. It is a sense of... so the biggest example for me, actually, when I think of this, is actually Assault on Doomrock. I love Assault on Doomrock. It has so many decks of cards, and there's something about shuffling decks of cards, especially different sizes of decks of cards, where the first one, okay, fine, I'm shuffling. The second one's like, okay, I'm shuffling more cards. By the time I'm shuffling the 5th deck of cards, I'm ready to give up. It seems like one of those things where my enthusiasm just drops off a cliff. This is really one of those areas where many hands make for light work. And it's just like, here's 9 decks of cards, shuffle them all individually. And this is so strange. I don't know if anybody else experiences this. Let me know if this is something that is evocative to you, listener. There's something about shuffling repeated decks of cards where the weight of not knowing when a deck has been shuffled really starts to weigh on me. It's not something I ever think about if I'm shuffling a single deck. Well, I think about it a little bit. But by the time I'm shuffling the 3rd or 4th deck, I'm like, I don't know. How shuffled is a deck? Do I need to keep shuffling? I have so many more decks left to shuffle. Oh, no. And then Der Schuffeln sets in. It's a whole deal.
Next one is too many modules or too many expansions or too many things. When you open up a box, I really wish the rulebook would say, here's how you play the base game. This is what you need. This is what we suggest you use as your baby's first module.
Yep.
And here's a list of modules that don't quite work together, so don't play these together. But, here's the base game, and maybe try these 1 or 2 things first.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that Shackleton base does.
Exactly.
If anything, I meant to comment on this before. I think Shackleton base needed to be a little bit more emphatic about its recommendation for your first play, because we've all been lied to by rulebooks before. It's like, look, in this incredibly simple tile-laying game that can be played by 6 to 8-year-olds. No shade. I love a lot of tile-laying games that can be played by 6 to 8-year-olds. We strongly recommend for your first few games, until you really know things, not to play with asymmetric boards. I'm like, forget it. And we do that in our first play, and we don't, and it's all fine. I remember in some of Vlaada Kvadl's games, there's an extra level of emphasis that specifically says, look, I know that other games tell you this, but we really mean it for your first play. Do it this way, guys. And they really should have done that in Shackleton base, I think, because you commented on the negative experience you had with your first play at Warm Boy's Merciless Hands. That
it was cruel,
that
really.
Fierce tyrant from the Maritimes. Because you didn't play with Baby's first Shackleton. Another thing that Shackleton does really well, though, in terms of managing all the modules, and this I think is one of the reasons why you're holding it out as a great example, is it has the little tuck boxes. every module comes in its own tuck box. So you look at the corporations, say, okay, we're playing with corporations A, B, and C. Tuck box A, tuck box B, tuck box C. There you go.
And it doubles down on that because then they also have a little sheet for each of those tuck boxes. And you hand it out to people, and there'll be a setup thing right at the top. So It's like, you are going to set up this corporation, you'll set up this corporation, and you set up that corporation. And then it's all there.
It's really, really well done. I remember back when introducing empty baggies into a game was somewhat revolutionary. It's like, oh, they gave us spare baggies. Now that's endemic. And now we're seeing more and more games come with tuck boxes when it makes sense and to help you with organization. I think it's wonderful. I was very surprised to see that Seven Empires came with a whole bunch of boxes to hold components. Now, they didn't go the extra mile, and now you have all these boxes without lids, and so you have to keep the box horizontal. If you ever stand it up, everything's going to fall apart. But it's still progress. I think that's very helpful and very useful, and more games can do it. It's an interesting thing that it's interesting that you pointed out the separate setup sheet, because I was always of two minds about this for some games. Matt Gertz, for a long time in all his games, had a separate setup sheet. So there were the rules that didn't talk about setup, and there was just a separate setup sheet. But his games, as a rule, are sufficiently simple that you don't really need that. I do wish that more complex games would do that more frequently, though.
I wish they just had it both. It's the exact same sheet that's in the rule book.
Fair enough.
Is a sheet. So then while you're looking up rules and or helping set up, someone else has the setup sheet, and it's all working together.
Yeah, this is especially true if there's information in different sections of the rulebook that relate to setup. Like one of the biggest pains of setting up Cerebria, the Inside World, is it's got a very good insert, at least in the version that I've got. It's got a little lovely plastic tray, and that helps. It's not drowning in different forms of currency, but it's got a couple, and so you just set up the tray, and there you go. That simplifies 3 or 4 different steps. But if you're going to be playing Cerebria, everybody starts with their own starter deck. And unless you use the deck construction rules, which new players are not in a position to understand, you then have to go to a separate section of the rulebook that lists out the starting decks, and there's only one copy of that, so it just goes around the table one at a time while everyone picks out the specific starting cards. It's probably my biggest misgiving about the setup of Cerebria, which, given that it's a really, really complicated game, and the rest of the setup is pretty straightforward, is a bit of a sticking point. If they had separate setup information, that at least would give the ability for more people to do it at once. And I wouldn't be flipping between page 5 and page 20 while doing setup, which is obnoxious.
So I have a bunch of stuff. I'm going to have to skip it later on, because I'll put it all in one, is the main board. When you open up the box, the main board should be on top. Not only that, when the main board is double-sided, it should be at the top of the setup, exactly how they're labeled, which side is which side, and which side you will need to play.
Yeah, the number of times when a manual says lay out the game board for the appropriate number of players based on what it says on the game board, it's like, where on the game board?
And it's like, where's Waldo? They've specifically hidden it somewhere.
You go hunting. Yeah, of course, and they don't want to make it prominent because you don't need it except for during setup, but it's so often the case that it's never shown in the rulebook where the symbol is. It's wild.
Yep. I hate it.
I hate it too. I hate it so much. I forgot about that.
The other thing I hate is when they not only, like, when double listing things. I know you want to save on paper or have the rule book shorter.
And sometimes redundancy leads to confusion, but go on.
It's true, but I want all of the components that are in the box listed under components. And then if you want to list the solo components again separately in the solo area, that's fine. I don't want to be looking at these bags and wondering what they're for, only to, go to page 97 where the solo rules are and say, oh, these are solo components, and then not need them.
So often we just have to engage in process of elimination. Oh, this is a piece. I've read the main multiplayer rulebook front to back. This is a piece that makes no sense to me. I must therefore assume that it is for the solo version. Which is easy enough, but it's obnoxious to do.
Exactly.
Like, good trays can make all the difference, right? So the Endeavor, all the Burnt Island versions of Endeavor have organized all the buildings or all the employees in a marvelous tray. You made the observation just today that Endeavor Deep Sea actually has an environmentally friendly tray. It's made out of cardboard, not plastic. Great for that. The new edition of Kemet organizes all the power trays, all the power tiles in trays, as opposed to the earlier versions of Comet where we had to buy things like coin sleeves to organize them that way, because otherwise it's just a nightmare. We're not talking about piles of things that get to be shuffled. That's obnoxious enough when you've got 7 different kinds of tiles, each of which need to be sorted and shuffled. That's bad. But when you've got a display of 12 unique things multiplied off of 3 or 4 different types that all need to be laid out, oof. Unless you give me specialized components to organize that, I'm going to be in serious trouble. That's the same thing with Food Chain Magnate. There's a Board Game Geek accessory that you can get, which is just an accordion thing that fits in the box top that allows you to organize all the employee cards. Otherwise, you have to put out like 20 piles of cards. It's just such a pain and eats up so much table space. It gives me a headache just thinking about it.
I have setting up player bags properly, and that's something I enjoy doing it and doing it right. So when, the game's set up, this person likes to play these colors, I just throw in the whole bag. Everything they need is in that bag.
Yeah.
They dump it out. Maybe they don't know where it goes, but at least they have it. You're not like opening up several different bags and dividing stuff up. And New Zealand does this where they have little spots in the insert where all these different tokens go, but all you're going to do is pull them out and give one to each player, whereas you could have just given them a bag.
Yeah.
And they would have had it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many inserts where they're like, well, we'll put all the components of this type together. It's like, no, you're going to give one to each player. Don't put them together. Lump them together with the other player pieces. Don't make me sort it a new time every time it happens. But
yeah.
That's a bigger insert problem. Your insert should be focused on setup. If you're going to go to the bother of making a custom insert, think about how a game is going to be set up and let that organize your insert, not any other way.
Yeah, my bold, underlined, twice sizes inserts suck. Like, I swear it's 90% suck, 10% useful. And I think that's being generous. Like I said, an insert should be made so that the rule book and the board are on the top. Those are the two things that should come out of the box first. You're not taking out all the components that fill up the table. Now you can't get the board on the table because there's so many components everywhere.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, the one bit of arts and crafts that I've ever done, I call it the Bjorkman Cradle. This is especially useful for games with lots of different bags of minis, where you want to organize the minis in a lot of different ways. So this is what I do with Street Masters most prominently, is every faction is in a Ziploc bag, and then you can't put the boards on top of minis because it'll crush them. So what you do is you take one of those transparent pieces of plastic that is put on top of minis trays.
The bubbles.
Invert it, preferably a flat one, but it doesn't have to be a flat one. Invert it, and then using a hole punch and ribbon, give it handles, and then put all the minis on the tray. So what you do is you just pull out the tray that has all the bags of minis on it, set it aside, and then you have access to the bag, the boards and the cards that would otherwise crush the minis and or leave indentations there. And you even go one step further than here's your player color, here's everything you need in it. You acquired, and at the time I was dubious, but it's really, really proven its worth, a full set of silicone trays in a whole bunch of different colors. And it's really simple. I thought it would just be additionally burdensome for setup and teardown. It's been quite the opposite, because while someone else is doing something, you look over there, it's like, there's a resource that's brown. And then you start assembling the brown silicone tray, and then it's there. And then you don't have to worry about 7 piles of things next to the board. It's just poured into this lovely silicone tray, and then when it comes time for teardown, all you do is you pick up the tray, and it pours neatly back into the bag from which it came. So it's actually turned out to be a time saver when I thought it was going to be a time sink.
Nice.
That's been your experience, I assume.
For sure, yeah. No, I'm more than happy with those. They turned out very nice. Next up, if there's something to be randomized, then include a way to do that. Like so many times you'll say, use a subset of this, or, randomly do this. And sometimes there's a ton of things, or they're giant, and you're like shuffling things that can't be shuffled, and you're trying to randomize it in a weird way.
Yeah.
It should be just like on a set of cards. It's like, okay,
yep.
Shuffle these cards, deal them out. Look, all the stuff for this particular random setup is there. And like
Ethnos has got good randomizers. You've got great randomizers for Street Masters to a large extent. You've got great randomizers now for the clinic modules.
Yeah, I was supposed to say.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. So Dominion has always had good randomizers right from the start. They've internalized this need for modularity that way. One thing that I find surprisingly difficult, this is something that I don't have a good reason for finding it this way, is when you have to take one card from a whole bunch of different piles. Let me give you a couple of examples. So in Spirit Island, when you're setting up the Invader deck, you randomly remove one card from each of the 3 piles, and it's a graduated deck. I find that the most burdensome aspect. I don't know why. Slightly more plausibly, you do the same thing in Innovation. Innovation has originally 10 decks, now it's got 11. And first of all, you have to shuffle each pile, so that it's only 10 cards each, but I still find it burdensome. That's unless you're playing with expansions. Every expansion you adds an entire new set of 10 or 11 new decks. You got to shuffle them each, and you got to take one card from each of them and then layer them onto the score track. For a simple game to set up, I find Innovation shockingly burdensome to set up. I don't know why.
I really like when everything is on the board.
Yes.
This is what I'm talking about when we're talking about games that have lots of decks of cards or piles of cards. I like when it's all on the board and there's designated spaces. Then you know everything you need is there and where it goes and where you need to look for it later.
Yeah, sometimes you can't do it, but when you can, I very much appreciate it.
And there'll be like a picture of what the back of the card looks like so you know exactly what deck that is.
Yep.
Because that leads into the other thing. I really wish in the rule books under the components they had pictures of everything in there. Because it'll say, grab X deck with no picture or anything, or have this token, but
front and back.
Yeah.
Because so often they only show the back or they only show the front, and then you're like, what deck is this? I can't quite place it.
I have to bring up that dungeon game.
Darkest Dungeon.
Darkest Dungeon
had so many decks of cards. The backs looked almost identical, and they did such a bad job of differentiating them. There were so many problems with that game.
Yeah,
yes, the setup was pretty nightmarish. That reminds me of a problem that a number of campaign games don't have. They don't tell you either how to track things from session to session. Darkest Dungeon did that a little bit better than most. Or how to reset it to 0. Right? You're in the middle of a campaign. Here's a quick description in the rulebook somewhere. It's kind of like a meta teardown. Here's how you reset the campaign. These are the cards you need and set them out this way. So,
like I said, I wish they had to do it with Burn Rangers.
Yeah, I was reminded of that.
And next, I have a couple things for teardown. All of that was for setup. Now,
I've got 2 things about setup. One that I really, really like, and one that I really, really hate. The one that I really, really hate is stuff here, stuff there. So, like Nostromo, Alien Fate and the Nostromo. You're told that at the start of the game there are coolant tanks in the following 5 locations, and there's 2 pieces of scrap in the following 5 locations, and you're just hunting and pecking through the board in the specific places. The worst example of this, though, is Stationfall. There's just this list of things that start on the board. There's a wrench over here. There's a helmet over here. That's even before the specific characters introduce specific things, but it's so many little individual things you need to put here, there, and everywhere. The thing that I love in setup, and it's completely irrational, well, it's not completely irrational, it's mostly irrational, is when the box is part of the setup. When the box is implicated in it, not even just because I appreciate that during the gameplay, it just makes me happy during the setup because I don't have to worry about where to put the bottom of the box. So Niagara does this, Boop does this, Ice Cool does this very well. Iron Forest does this as well, although Iron Forest then runs afoul of one of my least favorite aspects of setup, which is that you have to really squint to determine if if things are oriented properly based on the setup. Anyway. So I just love it when the box is implicated in the setup procedure itself. So talk to us about teardown.
Teardown, well, it brings into what you just said. For teardown, you take the top of the box and use it as a giant scoop, and you just run it along the table and just sort of flip everything in and then close the box and you're done. I don't see what the problem is.
So, well, that reminds me actually of a very common problem. I seem to do it more than most, which is mistaking the box top for the box bottom.
Oh, I don't even want to start on it.
And so you very carefully set everything in. Everything just fits, and you're like, oh, there's actually a little bit more room than I remembered in this game where the box is a little too small. And then you realize that's because you sorted everything into the box top.
You just lid loaded,
and you think you can take the bottom, and then kind of you can't. Nope. It doesn't work. You have to start over.
All right, so one thing I have... There's 2 games I've done this for, and that's actually labeled the bags. And I think this has very much eased the teardown. I've done it for Black Forest, and I've done it for Orleans, where I just put I've done it even more for Black Forest. I even put the number of how many things should be in the bags. And so you just throw them out on the table. People just can grab a bag. Oh, this is for that. And there needs to be X number of those things there. I forgot to put that for setup. I have it listed here, but I forgot to read it. I really wish when they said, shuffle this deck and put it out. I really wish they always would put the number of cards or whatever number of components that there actually is, just so you can double check that you have the right deck and you have all of the cards of that deck or whichever. Anyway, so back to that. You list the bags. People can just grab the bag and put what they're supposed to put in it.
Yes, I've resorted to the label maker, I think, only for Street Masters. Again, like those sprawling Kickstarter games where their all-in storage solution isn't perfect, and you have a whole bunch of expansions, and there's just so much stuff. You really have to be conscious of those things to facilitate both setup and teardown. Otherwise, it's just going to be burdensome. Just as a note, I think people need to know this about you, Walker. I think it says a lot about who Michael Walker is. Michael Walker is the kind of guy who has put a label that says label maker on his label maker.
As a joke.
You know what? I'm not 100% sure that it's 100% a joke. I am 95% sure that it is 96% a joke.
Lastly, for teardown. And this is what our group does. I think it really helps with the process, is that we just tend to put everything in like piles. It's like we have a player board. We just start grabbing all our components and dumping them on the player board, as the beginning. And it's like, here's a deck of cards. We put a few face down. Then everyone puts all of those type of cards there, all those type of tiles there, and they, everything gets put in its own pile. You dump everything that was on your player board into your player bag, and then stuff gets put away.
I will say that despite the fact that I prefer setup to teardown, I find sorting cards, if anything, mildly pleasant, and I find shuffling cards burdensome. So if there's lots of different cards, lots of different piles, I actually kind of enjoy the process if the cards are appropriately labeled, which most cards are, of just sorting them out.
51st State's the best example of that. Even though, it's a little mini print on the bottom, but, you've put decks together, and you're just like left, right, left, right, left.
Yeah. Any deck building game, even Xenoshift, which has a billion different types of cards, it's all laid out. There's this tableau with all the cards. Just sort them all out, put them back in their original piles. There you go, easily done. Yeah. So that's one aspect of teardown that I prefer to set up. I think mostly I just really hate shuffling cards. I don't enjoy it.
That's why we need that auto shuffler.
If I could find a good auto shuffler that didn't scuff cards, I would buy 7 of them, happily. So that's going to do it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us for So Very Wrong About Games. We appreciate you spending the time. If you're interested in supporting free and independent board game media, you can find us on patreon.com/svag. You can also check out our website, sowronggames.com. We hope to see you again soon. Say it all the time, but I desperately mean it. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your hobby. Thank you, Rules Explainer. Hope to see you again soon.
Peace!
You've been listening to So Very Wrong About Games, a board gaming podcast about board games produced by Michael Walker and edited by Marc. You can find all our information at sowronggames.com. Special thanks to What Does It Eat for allowing us to use their most excellent song, FOS, as our intro. You can find them at whatdoesiteat.com. We hope to see you again soon, and as always, try to be right, but remember, you're so very wrong.